Welcome to Consulting Mastery, where we help B2B consultants master the business of consulting. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Ahmed. Join us as we explore the art of delivering outstanding client value, earning a higher income, and thriving in today's marketplace.
All right, so I want to circle back to a conversation we had yesterday at lunch. How do you feel about that?
Lunch was good, so I'm open.
Lunch was good.
Is there food involved? Do I get a shish tavuk skewer here too?
I think everyone wants to hear us chewing our way through lunch on this podcast. Absolutely. But it was such an interesting conversation, and one that I believe can bring value to, brought value to me, brought value to you. I think it can bring value to our listeners at large as well. And that is the conversation we had about how to make good decisions when things are going off the rails, right? When you're uncertain, when things are unclear, when you're uncomfortable, when things just are not proceeding the way that you need them to. So let's talk about it.
I think the first thing is let's define good decisions. Good decisions and decisions at large. We have an episode on this, so I won't go too deep on this. It's called Decisions. Decisions should not be evaluated or judged based on the outcomes that are generated from the decisions. Great book on this topic. It's called Thinking in Bets. And that's the big idea there, is if you judge your decisions based on the outcomes they produce, that assumes that your decision is the sole driver of the outcome, which if you're in business or doing anything relatively complex, that's ridiculous, right? Your decision is one input among many other inputs that drive outcomes. So I think the first thing is to understand that, a good decision is a decision that follows a good process and that is made in a sound way based on the information available, acknowledging that the information available is always necessarily incomplete.
And just to build on that, it's really easy to think that you are making good decisions when things are going your way. And it's equally as easy to think that you're making bad decisions when things are not going your way. And, we could probably have a conversation about how to make good, effective decisions when things are going well. There's probably something to be, there's a deep dive to happen there. But for today, what we're talking about is what changes in your decision-making process when things go badly. So when you have a, bad month, when you take on, or you take a specific path to solve a specific problem and it, doesn't work. And the question really there is less about the specific decision itself, but more about how do you approach it? What do you do? What happens to your mindset, right? And, how quickly and effectively are you able to not just make a decision, but take action in troubled times?
So, quick comment on how to make decisions in good times. And I agree it's a separate conversation, but I just want to be, upfront here with the fact that it's harder to make decisions in good times, because this has been my personal experience, is when things are going well, you develop hubris. And you think that in the same way that you think that your decisions might cause negative outcomes, you think that when things are going well, your decisions cause positive outcomes. Whereas, we saw a lot of this when the recession, or at least the fears of a recession, initially hit. And what we saw a lot of in our business is people coming to us who had done well for years and years and years in a growing economy, and now felt like, the rug was getting swept out from underneath their feet. Like everything just fell apart, and they couldn't understand why. And the truth was, they didn't do anything particularly brilliant in good times. They just rode the wave. The market lifted them up, and they were there at the right time to capitalize on the opportunity. And they thought it was them. They thought, well, we did this and we did that and we're brilliant. And the truth is, no, you're not. You're at the right time, in the right place at the right time. And so I think that's just worth acknowledging up front. Is it's hard, and that's hard to be able to judge the quality of your decisions when things are going well. When they're not going well, it's a little bit easier because you have less hubris. So you're not clouded with, this idea that like everything I touch turns to gold and I make all the right decisions because things are evidently not going as planned. So at least in my experience, and again, I'm speaking from my own experience, when things aren't going well, you have a little bit more humility in approaching, what went wrong and why it went wrong, and having that conversation with yourself or with your team, with a little bit more objectivity.
That's interesting because when you first said it, it's more difficult when things are going well, I would argue, reframe this a little bit, that it is difficult in any circumstance when emotion is high
Mm.
or gets involved. And so whether that is the pat myself on the back hubris, or whether that is the, oh my goodness, the world is falling apart, that's the thing to watch for. If you can remove whichever extreme of emotion you're having and get, truly to sort of, the facts and a balanced way of considering your next step, to me, that's the safety zone. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, right? Like it's easy for me to say outside of all that in a podcast where we're not dealing with anything that's, too charged in any way. But it's probably also personality dependent, which one of those affects you the most. But to me, that's really the danger, when the emotion, whether that's fear or ego, starts to eclipse the solid decision-making process that you would use in the sweet spot. And whether that sweet spot is large or small for you, depending on how you tend to run, right? If you're someone who kind of bounces back and forth from high to low, or if you're someone who's able to stay in that calm zone, the question is how to get yourself back there so that you can move forward.
And I think on both sides of the equation, it comes down to don't make a big deal out of yourself.
Yeah.
Like when things are going well, don't assume it's because you made all the right decisions or because you're brilliant. And when things aren't going well, don't assume that your decisions are of such consequence that they've caused the results to be what they are. At the end of the day, speaking personally, we're a very small business. And the vast majority of our clients are very small businesses, smaller than us. And we operate in a very large market. And there's forces, macroeconomic forces, political forces, social forces, etc., technological forces that are far more powerful than the decisions that I make on a daily basis. And so I think one way to bring yourself down from the high of the hubris of making decisions, and also boost yourself up from the low of I can't do anything right, is to also kind of contextualize your very small micro role in a very large market and economy. And instead of trying to make all the right bets and make all the right decisions, thinking that your decisions are so consequential, focus instead on, for lack of a better term right now, riding the waves. There are waves in every market, and the wave that you may have been riding in the past might be coming to a halt, but there's another wave right behind it or beside it. Find the waves and get on those.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can really lean too far either way, right? You can decide that you impact everything. That's a choice. On the flip side, it's easy to be a bit of a fatalist and say, well, it doesn't matter what I do. It's just going to happen anyways. I might as well just, kind of crawl under my desk and let that occur. And so the real trick here is figuring out what you can control and to what degree, doing that, and then letting it go, right? Like we happen to be in the middle of the Olympics right now. I've been watching surfing. This is my new thing. I'm going to become a surfer. You're going to love it. It's
Nice.
going to be hilarious. But if you think about it, these guys are out there figuring out, they're building skill. They're getting better, all the things that we all do, right? Like getting better and better and better at our particular craft. And then at some point, they can make a decision about which wave to get on. Get on. Clearly not a surfer, because I'm sure there's better language for that. And then from that point on, they're making all of these decisions all the way through the ride, but they're also surrounded by this incredibly powerful thing. And my assumption would be that in some cases, their decisions are much more impactful. And in some cases, much less so. And that is going to be just as true in whatever you're taking on as it is for, these folks that are out there risking life and limb.
Well, I love the metaphor. And I'm glad I brought up the waves, even though I haven't been watching surfing, but now I'm going to, right? If it's still going on. Because, yeah, you're right. They don't do anything to trigger the wave. The surfer does not create the wave. They have no control over how big or small the wave is or the timing of it. That's the ocean, right? The ocean is this large, grand force that provides the waves, and the surfer's job is, like you said, when to get on it, which one to get on, what to do when you're on it, timing of this, timing of that. I also know very little about surfing, apparently, right? And that's the craft. And the folks who do really well are the ones who get really good at the craft and know how to make those decisions, but also know that they can't control necessarily the power or the extent or the height and so on and so forth. And so to me, I think where the rubber hits the road here, to your earlier point about knowing what you can control and what you can't control, is designing a system. And I'm speaking now more in terms of revenue generation, marketing, and business development. And there's another conversation to be had on the other side of things in terms of delivery and fulfillment and operations. But in terms of generating revenue and creating demand, what you need is to build a system that enables you to control the controllables and has very defined and clear parameters around the levers that you can pull and the buttons that you can press within the scope and the realm of what you can control. Completely, fully. So that you now have confidence, as long as you're working your system, that you are fully taking advantage of and affecting the controllables. And anything outside of that scope is by definition not controllable, and therefore should be, I don't want to say ignored, and we can have a more nuanced conversation about that, but certainly shouldn't be the focus.
Yeah, and you're talking about the system itself. And then I would argue that there's the second layer, which is just your mindset as this is all happening. Because it's also really easy to talk yourself into believing something that's not true, right? Believing that you have more control than you do, believing that you have less control than you do. The reality is it's not a science, right? You're not going to be able to define that, I can control 36% of what's going to happen moving forward. But, the real game is to have the system and also to be able to check yourself, right? Or work with somebody you can have a conversation with, whatever that is for you, just to challenge your beliefs, because beliefs are strong, right? Our brains will fill in blanks and create stories. And a lot of this is really about questioning that. And, spending 3 days in a strategy deep dive to try to figure out how to solve all of the problems in the universe, also requires some questioning around which of these things can we truly affect, which can we not for sure, and what are the things in the middle that we, should take some action around, but also recognize that we don't want to spin our wheels trying to, get too far into something that's not controllable. And so, I think, part of the system, or in addition to the system, however you want to look at it, is that ability to self-reflect and that ability to just challenge what you're doing, because you can, and I'm sure we've all done it and we've all watched people do it, right? Get into onto a certain path or into a certain groove and, run for miles before you realize that it really is not effort well spent.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm beating the horse multiple times to death, but it does feel appropriate to mention that part of that system, you have to have a way of meeting reality and finding out what the market wants and needs. And to me, this is a key piece that will settle your mind and will stabilize your mindset, because it's really hard to try to sell something and not know why no one's buying it. Like, that's a really good way to spiral, right? If you're selling something, you're selling it hard, you're marketing hard, you're selling hard, and no one's buying, no one's buying, no one's buying, and you don't know why, boy, that's tough. That's a tough place to be. Okay. And so when I talk about a system that controls the controllables, I'm including in that system a way of meeting the market where they're at and getting data from the market on what they need, not yesterday, not 6 months ago, not 2 years ago, but today. Because that then empowers you and enables you to make decisions that will allow you to create demand that addresses and satisfies the market's needs. And without that data, I don't care how strong your mindset is, right? Like, it's going to be hard to stay focused and stay productive when no one's buying what you're selling and you have no idea why.
Well, it all circles back, as many of these conversations do, to objectivity, right? Objectivity in understanding the span of control that you have, and objectivity in understanding the information that's at your disposal. And, in the end, that's really the trick. Putting those two things together is the way that you're going to figure out the most effective path forward.
Yeah. And I think a brief conversation here, I know we talked about it yesterday, about how much to pay attention to the uncontrollables and what to do about them. And I'm going to give you my opinion on this, and it's evolving. I haven't learned all there is to learn about business by any means. I'm merely scratching the surface. So I reserve the right to change my mind or to have a more evolved perspective on this in the future. But, today, as of the time of this recording, it's August of 2024. There still remains a very, fear-driven narrative around a recession or a pending recession or a current recession. There's a lot of political instability in the United States with an election coming up. Certainly, folks are feeling the pinch when it comes to cost of living and inflation and the costs of day-to-day purchases going up. And there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of concern. And my attitude when it comes to those things is it's worth spending some time understanding the macroeconomic, social, and political factors that are affecting your business, your market, and your customers. But you also have to be careful not to get swept up in that narrative. Because if you all of a sudden today start believing that, the economy's in the gutter and the political instability is going to be, completely destabilizing for my market and, this, that, and the other, well, then why try? Go dig a hole, put your head in the sand, and then wake up when the market returns. The problem is you won't exist if that's your attitude. You'll get swept away and you'll no longer be a going concern if that's your attitude. So I think you have to meet reality and understand what's going on and how people are thinking and feeling so that you can make the appropriate decisions when it comes to which market to pursue, what offers to sell, your pricing, your packaging, your messaging, so on and so forth, without getting swept up in a narrative that may have some truth to it, but isn't particularly empowering for your decision making.